Welcome to FinScale, a podcast created by Solen Niederkorn, shedding light on innovation in finance, banking, and insurance.
How PayPal Venture is shaping the future of corporate VC. Ashish Aggarwal, partner at PayPal Ventures.
And there's always this element of hesitancy in the mind of a founder, like, hey, you are PayPal, why should I be engaging with you? You could be a potential competitor. That's where the first, a couple of years, the role for us was to make sure we are very crystal clear in our communications, like we are set up to optimize, to maximize your benefit, and thereby we gain.
In this episode, I have a conversation with Ashish to explore the world of corporate VC. He shares with us the differences between CVC and institutional VC and what inspired PayPal to launch its CVC vehicle, as well as the primary goals of this initiative. We delve into the complexities of launching a CVC in the fast-paced and highly competitive startup ecosystem and how PayPal's CVC differs from traditional venture capital firms in terms of investment strategy and approach to portfolio management. Ashish also reveals how PayPal ensures that the startups in which they invest receive the resources and support they need to succeed and the value add PayPal brings beyond just capital. We also learn about the evolution of the CVC landscape since PayPal launched its vehicle and how they have adapted their strategy to stay competitive in this changing environment. In the second part of the podcast, Ashish provides us an inside look at PayPal Ventures, including its geographic presence, figures, team, and value proposition. We discuss how PayPal evaluates potential investment opportunities and the criteria used to determine whether a startup is a good fit for PayPal's portfolio. Ashish shares examples of successful investments made by PayPal's CVC arm, such as PPro and Kodat, and the rationale behind this decision. Finally, we learn about the role PayPal plays in supporting the growth and success of these fintech startups and how they work with founding teams. Enjoy the show! Hi, everyone. Hi, Ashish.
Hi, Solen. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm thrilled to have you on my podcast today. One of the things we're going to discuss is the difference between corporate VCs and traditional VCs, because I had a lot of VCs interviewed on my podcast. And you're going to give us great insights, not only with regard to PayPal and PayPal Ventures, but generally speaking about the corporate VCs. And I'm really excited about that. But before starting, can you tell us more about your background, your experience, and what draws you to working with startups?
No, absolutely. Firstly, thank you for having me here, and happy to share our thoughts on how we see the landscape and the role that CVCs play. Going back to your first question, Solen, if we go back to my first professional experience post my MBA, that was with Deutsche Bank, covering the fintech M&A banking space across London, across Europe. Did that for 5 years. I think that was back in the days in 2012 when fintech wasn't coined. It was called payment processing M&A, right? It's very plain, vanilla, boring stuff that nobody wanted to do. And it was two of us, me and my MD, who used to run around and do those deals at Deutsche. And to give you some examples, there was like the assets that came out of RBS, which we today known as WorldPay. Of course, that's now part of a bigger entity in the US. Assets that came out of all the Nordic banks, for example, Nets, that was an IPO process that Deutsche ran, and then Worldline in France. Those was the training ground for me to understand what payments is, what payment landscape looks like. And prior to that, all my experience education has been in India. Deutsche actually hired me from India, right out of MBA school. And so I did the first 2 years with the Deutsche Mumbai office before they moved me over to London.
Okay, excellent. And then PayPal.
Then PayPal. Well, I think again, you have to appreciate. I think banks do a very good job in taking raw talent and training you on the basics of the financial world, if I may, right? How to make sure you ask the right questions and look for the answers in the right place. I think having done that for 5 years, the next itch for me was like, hey, I do seem to like the payment space, but as a bank, there's a limit to how deep you can, or how much time you can spend with an asset. And your role is typically done after you close the deal. And that was the trigger point. Like, hey, if I want to go deeper into the payment space, where can I find that platform? very well knowing that my skill set at that point were very much M&A focused. So that if you put those things together, that came up to be my conclusion was, hey, I need to look for corp dev and venture roles in payment companies. And that's where I cold called myself into the interview process with PayPal. There was no process going on. There was no role on LinkedIn or anywhere. I just reached out to the global head of corp dev, who was kind enough and diligent enough to pick up a random email and put me in contact with all the process that I went through. Ended up joining the team when European platform was being set up. So I was the number 2 hire in Europe.
Great experience. Thank you very much, Ashish. Okay, so let's go back to basics. And can you please get back, because it's the first time I cover this on my podcast, so can you please get back to what a corporate VC is and how is it different from an institutional VC?
Yeah, again, I think that was also, again, my perspective there is, Solen, when you think about, or when people think about CVCs, they need to appreciate, while CVC is a broad nomenclature, a term, but the mandate, the rationale, the focus areas of CVCs vary significantly from one corporate to another.
Yes.
Right. So the question for anyone in the ecosystem when they engage with any CVC should be, ideally before they even speak to them, like, hey, what have they done to date? Why were they set up in the first place? And hence, is this the right group for me to engage with? For speaking on behalf of PayPal Ventures, we were set up in mid of 2016. So this is around close to 7 years now, 6.5 years. And the mandate for us very clear, like we were set up to drive a dual benefit of strategic insights for the PayPal Inc. corporate, as well as at the same time generating financial returns. So for us, the mandate is very much engaging with the external ecosystem and figuring out the trends that are happening that could be further away from PayPal's core business today, but likely will be relevant 2 years, 3 years out.
And how did the value proposition evolve over the time? Meaning that that was the idea initially, and did you have to adapt?
So I think the answer it in 2 forms, right? The value proposition is also is relevant equally internally and externally, right? So the question is like, how has PayPal Ventures done internally with our stakeholders? From that perspective, I think having a track record and being in the space for 7 odd years and having shown success has helped us gain more credibility internally. It makes easier for our portfolio companies when they want to engage with the various business units. So there's an element of credibility and trust that you gain over time. And externally, I think, again, to the point, the questions that are asked when you are a CVC, hey, why were you set up? What's the engagement model like? And there's always this element of hesitancy in the mind of a founder, like, hey, you are PayPal. Why should I be engaging with you? You could be a potential competitor. That's where the first, I think, a couple of years, the role for us was to make sure we are very crystal clear in our communications. Like we are set up to optimize, to maximize your benefit, and thereby we gain. We're not here to force feed you what PayPal way of thinking is. That's actually the opposite of why we are set up. We want to see what the others are doing outside. And as those portfolio has grown to 70 odd companies, that question those line of thinking doesn't come up as frequently as used to before, right? People know who we are. We have a bench of very credible co-investors that we co-invest with. We have a portfolio of 70 odd portfolio companies globally. And whenever we have any questions around why we are set up, we just, hey, you want to speak to any of our CEOs? Get a clear feedback or unbiased feedback or why you should be engaging with us, if at all.
Now it's been 7 years that you've started PayPal Ventures. What were, for you, the biggest challenge you faced those last 7 years?
I think, again, I would say that the challenge has evolved. I would think I will probably reiterate or repeat what I said before. I think the 2016, 17, 18, the first 3 years of Fund 1 were more around like, hey, who is PayPal Ventures?
Exactly.
Why do you exist? What is it for me as a founder? Versus now the question is more about like, on the ventures internal side, like, hey, we get so much deal flow. Now, what is our thesis in terms of where do we say no versus where do we spend time, right? Because to give you another data point, since those 7 years, we are now at our fund 3, which will kick off. The size of the team hasn't really grown, right? It's been the same similar count of 9 to 10 investment professionals, despite the portfolio growing exponentially and us spending more time in different themes and countries. So the challenge for us right now is to how to focus, how to narrow down and get better at time management and bandwidth management.
Yeah, which is similar to many, new startups or new funds launched, huh? Not specific to corporate.
Again, it's been an entrepreneurial effort where I think now it's also like we have a decent sized portfolio to help them. So there's a decent chunk of time goes into portfolio management.
If we go back to the difference between corporate VC and traditional VC, if I may call it like this, how does PayPal's CVC differ from traditional VC firm in terms of investment strategy and approach to portfolio management?
So I would say we are actually see ourselves as complementary to the institutional VCs, right? So I think about all the fintech-focused VCs. We are co-investors with them, whether it's Sequoia, Excel, Ribbit, Index. So we are very cognizant of what we bring to the table versus what others have. Again, going back to the infrastructure and staffing, there's a limit to what we can provide outside the quote-unquote fintech and payment expertise. Versus institutional VCs, those who have the infrastructure or platform teams to help scale the founders, especially at the early stages. That's the skill set that we very much acknowledge that we don't have. And that's also reflects in the stages that we focus on. We really don't have the bandwidth to focus on pre-seed or seed, right? So we focus on Series A plus with a again, from a vertical perspective, focusing on fintech and payments and trying to answer the question again and again, why should a founder accept our check? What do we bring into the table where he or she can see PayPal Ventures as part of the syndicate?
And how do you ensure, because you bring that industry knowledge, that very deep industry knowledge, how do you ensure that startups in which you invest have the resources and support that they need to succeed in those specific areas of payments, for instance? How do you leverage on the group's capabilities?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think what we like to say is like, hey, you have, as a founder, you have many of options you can tap into at PayPal. Now, those options, if I may, will vary on where the company is in their stage of evolution. A Series A company might have different expectations of engaging with PayPal Ventures versus a Series C company, for example. And also a company, we will have, again, different set of capabilities to support them if they are in the US or Europe, which are the core markets for PayPal, versus in the emerging markets where not so much, right? So it becomes a function of where you are on the life cycle, what business model you can do. To give you an example, I think what we offer for sure is like, hey, you have unrestricted access to the senior exec or the leaders in the BUs who more likely than not have already gone through the questions that you are trying to answer, right? Whether it's about new payment partnerships or new country expansion or scaling merchant acquisition or scaling consumer acquisition, how to manage regulations. We have point of contacts internally who do that on a daily basis. So if you want to speak to any of them, that's something we offer for our portfolio companies. The second thing could be also a combination of like, hey, that's just PayPal, the PayPal ecosystem, but we also have a deep network of ecosystem outside PayPal that we can help you connect into. Those, especially in the payments and the financial services space, again, and the fact that PayPal operates globally, that's also, again, is applicable whether you are a startup in Singapore or a startup in the US.
Thank you, Ashish. There is one thing that you told me last time when we had our discussion a few weeks ago about the fact that PayPal doesn't see the investment in the startup as a partnership play. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I understand that. I think, again, for us as PayPal Ventures, we are very transparent and with our founders when we speak to them and co-investors, we can definitely get our portfolio founders in front of the right executives in the chain and help them navigate the hierarchy. But again, we are also very cognizant that we don't own the roadmap. So it's very hard for us to, or impossible for us to promise of what PayPal could do with you. But again, I think if I give you some examples, whether for the names where we both the startup and PayPal and Ventures work closely to bring that partnership to life, right? Where example Tink, which is now owned by Visa, Kodak, or PPro, or a number of companies in the US, they are not just investments for ventures, but they're also partners, commercial partners with PayPal. Did that happen on day one? No. Was there a requirement for us to do investment? No. But again, we acknowledge that having PayPal as a client is a win-win for everyone across the table. For PayPal, for naturally, but also for the portfolio company and PayPal Ventures.
So it's rather opportunistic.
Correct.
Do you think that the PayPal CVC had a sort of impact on PayPal's organization?
If you think about operating, I think the way we try to, again, engage with the ecosystem or rather internally with PayPal is like, hey, we do multiple touch points with various BUs on a regular basis, whether it's monthly cadence or a quarterly cadence or bespoke as and when we think there's a need to help them appreciate what's happening globally, the trends that we see in the startup ecosystem.
Yes.
And if there is any pain points that we could help them solve, for example, like if they are looking to solve a particular challenge, can we go out, look into our portfolio or look into the ecosystem for anybody who could partner with PayPal to solve that pain point?
Mm-hmm. If one of our listeners wants to launch a CVC vehicle, what kind of advice you would give him or her about launching a corporate VC?
I would say the number one advice would be to make sure you are very clear on the mandate, that why you are set up, what is the KPI for success, and make sure that is well understood by the various stakeholders internally.
Clearly.
Because I think it's very easy to get pulled into different requirements for the corporate, which might not align with the purpose of why you were set up in the first place.
Yeah, clearly. So a mission letter, very clear mission letter.
That's right. I mean, again, I think it helps to continuously reiterate it to make sure, again, I think everyone has the same level of expectations of the goals this group is expected to solve for or achieve.
And looking ahead, what are some of the trends and developments that you see shaping the CVC landscape in the coming years? And how are you preparing the team for these changes?
I would say I think we spend most of our time looking into the trends of in the fintech and the startup space. So really don't spend time thinking about CVC as a space any different to a VC space. But I would think again, think about from a corporate perspective, it goes back to why you were set up and who are you competing with internally. If it's a capital allocation question, you need to demonstrate value, which hopefully compensates against the other options that corporate might have, which could be share buyback or dividends or M&A. So it goes back to like if you are a balance sheet funded CVC group, you need to be able to continuously demonstrate value of how you deliver returns on invested capital.
And do you think that CVC landscape is more mature in the US than in Europe, for instance?
I think if I speak about the tech and the fintech space, I would tend to agree with you. I think it's probably also a function of where most of the larger organizations are based. But again, going back to another data point, I think that we have shared publicly before, for us, the mandate from the board is actually to invest at least 50% of our capital outside the US. So even if your home location, if I may, it might be the US, I mean, we at least operate globally. We have companies all the way in, we have a third or 20% of our capital deployed in APAC. So we're truly global by the nature of opportunities we look at and the capital we deploy.
Okay, thank you very much for this big introduction. It was very insightful. If we focus now more on what you do, the team, figures, and the different portfolio companies, can you please shape us and present us what PayPal Ventures is today?
Happy to. Again, I think maybe let's start with the team. So as I mentioned, we have a team split between the US and London, in total of 9 investment professionals and 4 operating team partners. So the mandate or the investment team focuses on sourcing of new deals, developing new thematics, and again, of course, founder outreaches and maintaining and nurturing those relationships with the external VC ecosystem. So of those 9 folks, we have 7 people in the US, and I'm the partner responsible for leading PayPal Ventures coverage across EMEA and APAC. And then I have another colleague who works with me in the London office.
Okay. And to be very pragmatic, how do you evaluate potential investment opportunities, and what are the criteria you use to determine whether a startup fits PayPal's portfolio?
So I think it's a combination of a proactive approach versus a reactive approach. I think proactively we tend to spend a lot of time going deeper into a space, understanding who are the various players in the ecosystem, incumbents or the challengers, where the pain points are by the respective customer audience, and trying to narrow down into the potential differentiating factors for anyone to make a big business in the space, and then approach the startups to figure out like who are the ones we should engage with, if at all, right? So that's what we, again, when we try to speak to the founders, we probably would have done some bit of homework already on what this space is going through and what are the challenges and opportunities. The second side, I think reactively is a combination of looking at Series A plus. So you need to be at least revenue generating, need to be at least $1 million in ARR, and needs to be in fintech and payments. Again, I think from a business model perspective, as a team, we probably are over indexed or on B2B, whether it's B2B fintech or B2B SaaS. But again, I think we are fairly nimble in terms of appreciating wherever we see a unique business being built up. And then I think from a geography perspective, again, it's truly global. I think, again, we will have certain markets where we spend more time than others. But again, for us, the first filter is the business model that you're after, and followed by the country or the market you're in.
Okay. And if we think about just risk management and considering also the experience you have in banking sector, would you say that managing risk in a CVC portfolio differs from managing risk in a traditional VC portfolio, because you're attached to a big group where you might have some internal policies and some constraints also in terms of reputation, or it doesn't really, there is a clear distinction and it doesn't have any impact?
Well, I think, again, there is always the heightened sensitivity around. That's already hopefully sorted out when we do an investment, right? When you think about, like, if we want to associate with this startup, those questions around brand risk are already taken into consideration. Now, if we have made the bet to support that founder, then we are in with him or her through the journey. So, and I think that's where reassessing the risk or the risk mitigation, that happens, but I wouldn't say, at least for us, we would overly index on it just because we are a CVC.
So you have you said you already invested in 70 different kind of startups. I have in mind Modular or Monies. Can you share with us a few examples of successful investment that you've performed, and what was the rationale between these decisions?
Yeah, happy to. Again, I think Modular and Monies both are London-based and pan-European platforms. I think another name, few names I can talk about. Maybe I think, Solène, given the audience, maybe perhaps I can talk more about the European names that I've covered for the team or led for the team. So, for example, Codad. Now, Codad is a UK company. which helps, which is in fact building an SMB data network to unlock the data that SMEs has outside the bank account ecosystem, right? We've had this innovation around open banking, which allows for the players to tap into the bank account information, but there's a lot of rich SME data in their respective accounting packages, in their POS systems, in their payroll systems, in their payment systems that are still hard to access. And that's what Kodat ends up building for anyone to tap into the SME's underlying health. You can use Kodat as an API to connect into various software stacks that the SME might be using.
Any other example?
Yeah, another example I think would be PPRO in again UK/Germany company. You would appreciate this, Solen. Europe has a number of locally relevant payment methods. For example, Ideal in Amsterdam, or Multibanco, or Blick in Poland. And what PPRO does is help PSPs and merchants to integrate into those plethora of locally relevant APMs, all through a single API or through a single platform. So the question is now for a consumer, let's say a Dutch consumer comes on a UK merchant website, the Dutch consumer can ideally go through the shopping experience using a payment method that they are very well versed and comfortable with, versus a Polish consumer who might see a different choice based on, of course, their payment preferences.
Okay. Can you say a few words about your next steps and what is your ambition?
Well, again, yeah, for us, we are deploying out of a new Fund 3, which is going to be a 500 million fund. And for us, the strategy continues to be the same, fintech and payments, Series A to C, with a mandate for the team to invest globally. I'm spending a lot of time in the same sectors across Europe, across India, across Southeast Asia. And that's where most of our time goes into meeting the ecosystem, whether it's founders or VCs, and again, trying to do the homework to make sure we can add value to those founders.
Ashish, it's the end of our recording. Can I ask you to make a recommendation to the audience, a book or a podcast or whatever?
Yeah, sure. I think again, I would say there's already a lot of fintech literature, so I would keep away from giving you another fintech podcast or a newsletter. But one of the books where I have enjoyed reading is by the author of Dilbert, the comic strip. The book's name is How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. And I think I've enjoyed it a lot. I've gifted that book to a few friends. And that's something I often come back to whenever I'm trying to recollect.
Thank you very much, Ashish. That was very inspiring, as always, on my podcast.
Thank you so much, Solen, for having me.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you all for listening and sharing this moment with us. Don't hesitate to contact me on Twitter or LinkedIn to share your comments and reactions. You can also rate this episode on your favorite podcast platform. See you soon.